Cool. Well, thank you so much, friends and colleagues, partners. We're so excited to be here today at this beautiful venue with just wonderful people in the room. So, as we look around the room, there are just some amazing leaders doing great work. And I hope you have a moment to connect with each other and share, because what this is about is being able to lead around the corner. And we can only do that with great friends and allies and inner circles that really help us see beyond our own wisdom and able to reflect. So, please take the time. If you haven't met someone new today, please meet someone new. So take a moment, turn to the person next to you and say, we're going to learn something today. And then say, because you need it. All right, so as we get into today, there's a few thank yous that I want to start with. We have 4 partners that have helped us put on this event. So as I introduce the partners and sponsors, if your entire team can stand just for a moment of recognition. So we're going to start first with a very special thank you to John Dennis and his team from Woodrock, if you guys could stand. Woodrock is a leading investment banking firm known for a highly quantitative approach, excellence in execution, and commitment to building long-term client relationships, which we can attest to. Under John's leadership as a managing partner, they specialize in mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, and corporate development. Their personalized services and global reach made them a trusted partner for businesses navigating very complex financial landscapes. So, John, thank you again for your team being here today. Next, a special thank you to Tanglewood Legacy Advisors. If I could have you guys stand. Tanglewood is a premier provider of family CFO services for over 2 decades. Led by Andrew Gardner and Kevin Roth, Tanglewood brings CFO level expertise to personal wealth, tax, and legacy planning. Their forward thinking approach helps successful families in Houston manage their private financial affairs with the same strategic rigor as the business world. Who wouldn't want to have a family CFO? So, thank you so much for Tanglewood and their contribution today to the event. And then one of our newer partners is Crow, which we found out also that does Scott's taxes. So if there's anything that we need to know, we do that. But we're honored to have them. They're a top-ranked public accounting and consulting firm that delivers audit tax advisory services with deep industry insight. So if I could have the Crow team stand, we want to give you guys a special thank you. Wonderful. They are recognized also as one of the best places to work, so they'll share their wisdom with us. Finally, I'm up here representing Allen Austin today, and again, couldn't be more excited. We believe at Allen Austin that great leaders build great cultures, and great cultures really build wonderful organizational health. So we do that through retained executive search, leadership advisory, culture shaping, leadership development, and interim services and projects. So we really want to make it run better, and that's our goal with our founder, Rob Andrews, who I'm going to turn it over to. Rob has been setting leadership for I'd say a couple decades, but I don't want to give away age. Okay. So Rob's recently completed a master's, working on his doctorate now, and he really exemplifies a lifelong learner. So I'm going to bring Rob up to introduce our guest today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Liz. Also want to thank everyone for coming this morning, and also want to recognize people on the Allen Austin team who put all this stuff together. There is a massive amount of administrative things that have to take place to put one of these together. We got a really great team, including Talibra Hollins, Demi Duggar, Madison Townsend. Let's see, who am I leaving out? Safa Chowdhury. There are a bunch of people who really busted it to get all this put together. So now we get to introduce the leader. And Scott, I had him send me his bio, and he said, "Don't read all that stuff. People are not interested in bios; they're boring." But I got to tell you, Scott's been one of my favorite people for about 34 years. He was the brand new division head in Austin in 1991 when I first met him. He took this market from HEB market from zero in 2001 to a commanding share of the market today. He's a fabulous guy, and he's one of those guys who understands me. when I tell him about my wife who makes fun of me because I took her to the HEB grand opening on San Felipe for Friday night date night. Anyway, without any further ado, Scott, come on up.
There's a clicker up here.
Oh, great. Who doesn't go to a grand opening for a date? When we would go on vacation, we would go visit supermarkets. My kids thought that was weird. Eventually, they got used to it. Oh, there I am. There. So it was after I was asked to move for the 7th time in 10 years that I realized relocation was part of the company culture, or as we called it, the corporate migration program. Let's just say I was a little slow on the uptake to pick up on this. I was living in Canada with my wife and 2 daughters, and my wife's grandmother also lived with us. And I was running sales for Frito-Lay Canada. And I was asked to move to Delhi, India, which is a far cry from the route truck that I started on when I started my career there 10 years earlier. And all the previous moves were easy decisions. They were a promotion with more money and a bigger title. But this one was going to require moving halfway across the globe with 2 kids and an 85-year-old. So I declined, and the big boss said to me, well, we weren't really asking. You know, we had a story we said at HEB that the day you got hired, they put a gun to your head and you started running, and you either got promoted or you got fired. And that's what I realized was it was up or it was out. The thing about culture is that it's not created in off-site retreats or enshrined in mission statements that hang on the entry of the business. It's built in the trenches of daily decisions, like, do you use reply all or not? What are the language patterns, the terminology that are used daily about if you have employees or associates or something else? Or do you have challenges or do you have problems? Because these subtly reinforce cultural attitudes and teamwork and problem solving. Or do you have reserved parking spots? Or does the person who gets the best parking spot, is that the person who shows up earliest? So what I'd like to talk to you guys today about is taking control of your culture at your company before it takes control of you. And I promise not to use the word synergistic paradigm shift unless that's part of what you do. And if it is, you got bigger problems than sitting here listening to me. It's a way to think of culture. It's simply a shared way of doing something with passion. And the reasons why customers choose to do business with any business can be distilled down into 4 points of distinction: location, price, quality or differentiation, and people, also known as service or experience. And to the extent that a company can win on at least 2 of these, then you have leverageable differentiation versus your competition. So we all know Buc-ee's. It's a Texas phenomenon, 80,000 square foot convenience store with 80 gas pumps, 20 stalls in each bathroom. But their genius starts with locating their stores just off of an interstate that's 1 pee break away from a large city, and their restrooms are so clean that you're proud to sit down on the toilet seat. That's where it starts. You know, or if you look at Spirit Airlines, price, their whole thing is around low price, because for about the price of taking your family to Chili's for dinner, you can fly somewhere. Now, there are trade-offs. For instance, you have to be a contortionist to sit in the seats because there's no leg room, and you're going to pay for any upgrade that you might want. Free water, $3. The fee for a check bag, your firstborn. I need to change a ticket? Good luck. When it comes to product quality, now, I don't eat pizza very often, but when I do, it's a splurge. And so as a result, I'm not going to order from Pizza Hut or Domino's or Little Caesars. I'm going to treat myself to the absolute best pie that I can find anywhere. And I'm willing to drive across town to find one with the best ingredients that's been cooked in a wood fire oven, even if it's a little bit more expensive. If you can have a product that's better than or uniquely different from someone else, then people will choose you or drive to you in order to get your product. Now, if you look at my haircut, it's not the best haircut you've ever seen. And it's also not the cheapest haircut that I could possibly get. My dad was a fan of that. He would go and he'd say, look, I got a $5 haircut. What do you think? And I'd say, it looks like it cost you $5. But I've gone to Loris here religiously for the last 10 years because she's part psychologist, part hairdresser, and she always has a good story to tell. When I was young and my mom would go to the supermarket, she would always get in a certain checker's line, even if it was longer than anyone else's, because she made going to the store more fun. And it's around these 4 points that business strategy is developed and companies are positioned. Now, all companies understand the importance of having a strategy in order to achieve its objectives. Strategy offers a formal logic that a company can obtain its goals. It brings focus, it brings direction, it orients people and time and resources around them, and it sets priorities. And the truth is that a company with a weak strategy is a little bit like a comedian with no punchline. There's a lot of setup, but not much payoff. And so in large part, the strategy piece is why you guys get paid the big bucks. But what people don't really understand as clearly is the role that culture plays in enabling strategy. If strategy is it's the strategy accelerator. It acts like the fletching on the back of the arrow. It gives you height, it gives you accuracy, it gives you speed. And a team is either enhanced by the culture of the organization or hindered by it. But while most companies spend a lot of time on strategy, in general, they spend a lot less time on culture. Companies will have regular strategic reviews, but rarely do they have an annual culture review. And you can't be consistent about the culture if your employees aren't really clear about what it is. Or said another way, if strategy and culture are inextricably linked, you might want to be as clear about what your culture is and what you stand for as you are about your strategy. So maybe in its simplest definition, this is culture. It's what you do when the CEO, and this is Charles Butt, the CEO of HEB, when he isn't in the room. And every company has a culture. For some companies, a lot of time is spent developing it and tending to it. A company's culture dictates how it treats its customers and how it treats its employees and how it reacts to opportunities and threats and what the work environment is like every day. For others, cultures start with and end with a poorly written mission statement that gets hung on a wall, or their culture is simply an amalgam of how different managers choose to lead. And then there are those companies where culture just evolves, like a set of unwritten rules that everyone figures out based off of how things have been going on for a long time, and it can lead to strategic drift. Without a North Star, quarterly results can become the only meaningful measure of success, like at this company. Founded in 1985, Enron was thought to be a genuine American success story. And just a decade later, they were one of the 7 largest corporations in America. Started as a natural gas pipeline business, and then was considered to be one of America's most innovative companies. Here's their mission statement. It contains aspirational platitudes associated with greatness that are supported with a commitment to integrity. Obviously, nobody read it or paid much attention to it. The company put extreme pressure on performance. They implemented a rank and yank system where 15% of its lowest performers were weeded out every year. This created desperation to show results at any cost. The culture celebrated risk, but then they didn't establish proper accountability. And in the end, well, we all know what happened. And in fact, the mission statement probably could have just read, when the ends justify the means. If what Peter Drucker said about corporate culture is true, then why is it that we see so many companies not pay that much attention to it, to what they say their stated values are, or drift from them over time? Wells Fargo created selling pressure, a cooker that resulted in $3.5 million unauthorized accounts to be opened. They had to pay a $3 billion fine, 5,300 people lost their jobs, and their stock lagged other banks by 30%. Uber had a bro culture that led to a war room mentality that prioritized competition over ethics. And Boeing's culture, from engineering excellence to financial focus has led to a loss of faith in the company. And when they had to pull the MAX jets off and out of the air, it cost them $20 billion. Now, these three failures share a lot of common elements. Leadership that prioritized financial results over ethical standards, compartmentalized information flows, suppression of internal dissent, and short-term thinking. So if culture eats strategy for lunch, then maybe it might make some sense to pay some attention to the recipe. Let's look at another example with a better ending. KPMG had a problem. Only half of their employees had a favorable impression of the company. Or said another way, half of their companies had an unfavorable impression of the place that they went to work every day. Now, in Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, he offers that if you'll state your purpose and your cause and your belief, that's critical, because when people connect with your why, they develop better loyalty. So KPMG went to work on their mission statement. They wrote it and they rewrote it, and once they came up with something that they like, right there, once they came up with something that they liked, then they sent it out to all their employees. And they put it on posters and they posted it on the company website. And it didn't work. Here's the thing about corporate mission statements. Generally, nobody pays any attention to them. Often they're created by C-suite executives who go to an off-site retreat, followed up by a series of workshops that result in 27 words to explain the company's why. Many are uninspiring and mediocre, neither lofty enough or descriptive enough or authentic enough to be helpful. It's as if words have been put into a blender and mixed up, but they don't have any meaning for the rank and file. And frequently, if you took the logo off the top of the page, you'd have a hard time figuring out what company you were talking about, like this one for the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. You see, they don't speak clearly to the employees, and this breeds confusion because the employees don't see their role in it. And without action, that a mission statement can foster cynicism. So KPMG had an issue, and that's that accounting is boring. Sorry, Crow. Most of your time is spent sitting in a cubicle, looking at documents and working on spreadsheets. And if you work in audit, like you go to a place that really doesn't want you to be there, and they certainly don't want to answer any more of your questions. So employees couldn't find any inspiration in the lofty mission statement that talks about growth and shareholder value, business trends, or even disruption. What KPMG found was that rather than answering the why we do what we do, it was much more compelling to answer who is served by the work that we do. And this involved telling stories. And they called it the We Shaped History campaign, to explain how KPMG had been involved in some of the most historical moments in history, like when they certified the election of Nelson Mandela in South Africa in 1994, or when their accountants worked to resolve conflicts and accounting claims that led to the release of 51 hostages in the Iran hostage conflict in 1991. Or they even went back so far as that they managed the logistics of Roosevelt's Lend-Lease Act that sent millions of dollars to U.S. allies in World War II. They began to answer the who, and it made the company more relatable, but what they did next is what was genius. They asked their workforce to share their own stories of how and for who they made a difference for others. And they ended up getting over 42,000 different entries. Now, think about it for a minute. In your job, when was the last time that you felt the most inspired and the most engaged at work? And my guess is it wasn't that time that your boss stood up and read you the mission statement. Instead, you'd relay some story about the last time you felt that you were really important, you did important work, and that you were appreciated. So KPMG employees could make their own posters about their who and post them up, highlighting their work. And it showed the meaning of their work. And they began to circulate these stories and celebrate these stories around the company and acknowledge the employees for what they've done. And retention and engagement grew. Why? Because KPMG moved from having a transactional relationship with their employees to having a relational relationship. And here's what they learned, that a company culture isn't about the company, it's about the people. And in the end, it all boils down to this one very important fact, that everybody wants the ability to make a difference, regardless of their title or their role in the company. So maybe one of my biggest learnings of my career at HEB occurred during the Hurricane Harvey in 2017. If you were here, you know what it was like. We got about 40 inches of rain. The city came to a standstill, but people still needed the ability to get food or get cleaning supplies to clean up their homes. And at HEB, we were committed to being the last to close and the first to open. And it was because our employees, we call them partners at HEB, understood that Houstonians were relying on them, and it was clear that this was their chance to make a difference. That explains this post about Francisco walking to work with his uniform in a bag in order to get to work to serve people. Now, after the storm passed, we put out a call across the company, and we have stores that go from Midland on the east to Midland on the west to Orange on the east to Waxahachie, now Plano, and Brownsville, and we said, hey, we need help getting back into business. And we had 2,000 of our partners volunteer to come help us. And they drove over in cars of 4, and they slept on the floors at somebody's house, and it was dirty work, and it was long hours, but when they would walk into a store, and customers would be lined up all the way to the back wall, the customers would see them and start cheering. And later, when these partners would reflect on their favorite experience in their careers at HEB, they would point to that shitty time that they helped HEB get back into business. Why? Because they made a difference. And we're all wired to want to make a difference, but in a corporate structure, you have to create an environment where employees feel empowered to do so and acknowledge them when they do it. Now here's another example. The guy in the red shirt here with the Fu Manchu mustache, his name is Mark, and he's a maintenance partner in one of our stores up in Conroe. His job is he cleans the floors and he cleans the bathroom, and when you talk to him, you get a sense from Mark that there's real dignity in every job. Mark's proud of what he does, probably makes $25 an hour. Well, he noticed when he was at work and it was raining that our partners who would take the groceries out to the cars of people who had ordered online, then it was raining, that the groceries would get wet and the partners would get wet. So Mark had a shop at his house and he built this canopy, and then he put some plastic over the side of it, and when the partners took the groceries out when it was raining, they didn't get wet anymore. And when I met him, he told me that this version cost $220. He said, but Scott, I think my next one I could do it for $200. Nobody told him to do this. And I leaned over and I said, Mark, I got to tell you, I love you, man. And I gave him a $2,000 bonus. And today we call that the Mark Cart. He saw a need and he did something about it, and it made him feel alive. It also made the HEB experience better for our customers because their groceries weren't wet, and our partners because they didn't get wet. And I'd offer this, is that everybody has 4 ideas. I do. One of them's really good, 2 of them really suck, and 1 of them might be okay. And my job was to try to find the good ones. And what I came to realize was that the people who are close to the work have got great ideas. But if you don't ask about them, they aren't going to share them because they feel intimidated. And when I did, it took a lot of pressure off me having to be very smart. At HEB, we sell groceries for a living. That's what we do. But the who we serve are our partners, our customers, and our communities. We worked a lot on paying a living wage. In fact, in 1995, I was running marketing and procurement for HEB. On a Sunday afternoon, Charles Butt and I went down to the Rio Grande Valley, and we found ourselves in a little store in Mission, Texas. And as we walked the store with Charles, he found someone who was a manager on the front end, and he said, hey, can I buy you a Coke? And she's like, me? Because, I mean, Charles Butt was God at HEB. So we sat down in the cafe and had a Coke, and he visited with her, and he said, would you mind telling me how much I pay you? A long time ago. And she said, you pay me $10 an hour. He said, do you work full time? She said, yeah, I work 40 hours a week. And so I always had a blue Sharpie and a pad, and I saw him write down $400. And she said, are you married? And she said, yeah. He said, what does your husband do? He works at Home Depot. And how much does he earn? He earns $24,000 a week. So you see him writes down how much he earns. And he goes, do you guys own a house? And she goes, oh no, we can't afford to own a house, we rent. He goes, I don't mean to be nosy. I go, what do you pay in rent? So she told him, and he wrote it down. And so what Charles was doing was he was creating an income statement for this woman to get a feel for if he was paying her a living wage. Because if we weren't, we were simply going to be a toll stop for her until the next time she could find a job that would pay her more. And so at HEB, instead of celebrating how little we could pay people, whenever we gave a raise, we would cheer that on because we made people's lives better. For years, we focused a lot on trying to get our prices below Walmart's. We challenged ourselves to try to remove expense in a way that neither the customers nor our partners, our employees, would see, to make the work easier for them and make the experience really transparent for our customers. I remember just before Albertsons left South Texas, one of the things they did to cut costs was to turn off 25% of their lights. That's not transparent. And every year, we reinvest 10% of our pre-tax earnings back into the communities that we serve. Because if they prospered, more people would move to them. And then we would sell more groceries. And we'd ask our partners to volunteer, and that made them proud to work for a company that put their money where their mouth was regarded to their communities. Now, this was our marketing strategy. We used simple and direct language to describe what it is that we do. We don't use platitudes or fancy business verbiage. We simply say, sell shit they don't. Because if Walmart buys in train loads, we buy in truckloads, and there are cost efficiencies that come with that. And they were 17 times bigger than us, or Kroger's 5 times bigger than us, and they benefit from this economy of scale. But Walmart can't be lower priced on items that they don't sell or carry. And so we formulated our strategy around how it is that Texans eat. And because if we carried the items that were unique, customers would drive past Walmart or Kroger to get to us. And because we're from here, we live here, we understand how Texans eat is different than how people in California, New York. I was raised in LA. You know, I never ate a brisket until I moved to Texas, and then I found out it was a religious experience. So the job of every one of our buyers was to do this. It was pretty clear. Or twice a year, I'd stand up in front of all of my managers and I'd tell them this: you can't be an asshole and run one of my stores. It's pretty simple to understand. And if you were an asshole, you needed to change or you'd get promoted to another company. As once we termed a few managers, it sent a clear message to everyone up and down the org chart that this was a value that we were strongly committed to. And this quartile chart, I think, says a lot about culture. It's got 4 quadrants. The vertical axis is results. Do you get them or not? Horizontal axis is culture. Do you uphold it or not? So it's pretty easy to know what to do with somebody who gets results and upholds the culture. You promote them. Similarly, you know what to do with somebody who doesn't get results and doesn't uphold the culture of the company. You term them. The real question that defines your corporate culture is, what do you do with the people in the upper left-hand corner? They're the people that get results, but they get them at the expense of people. They're the money makers that nobody really wants to have to work for. And they were the assholes that we decided we couldn't afford to have on board because of the impact that it would have on its culture. If I start with the premise that I've been married 44 years and I love my wife, but many weeks I would spend more of my waking hours at HEB than I would with my wife, it only stands to reason I should like where I work. Tony Heisch, who was the CEO of Zappos, he said, it's really important to have core values that you can commit to. And by commit, we mean that you're willing to hire and fire based on them. And if you're willing to do that, then you're well on your way to building a corporate culture that's in line with the brand that you want to build. So we spent a lot of time on values at HEB, tried to put them in simple language, and then we took 3 adjectives that tried to describe who it is that we are: trust, curiosity, and customer and community focused. I love this quote by Kevin Plank, who is the founder of Under Armour. A brand is built on trust. Trust is built a drop at a time, but it can be lost by the bucketful. The stronger the trust, the stronger the brand, because when you make decisions that affect your customers or your employees, you're ideally making small deposits every day into that trust bank. But when what you do doesn't match up to what you say you are, you can lose trust in your business quickly. And you only have to look as far as Boeing or Wells Fargo to understand that. The second word is curiosity, and over time, it became the number one trait that I would look for in terms of hiring new people to work at HEB or promoting them. In a business where we would take 1 penny to the bottom line, we had to consistently find ways to be better or different. Now this is Hugh. Hugh opened our store in Meyerland. And if you're familiar with Houston, Meyerland has a heavy Jewish population. So unlike our competitors, we tailor the merchandising of every store. If I kidnapped you, blindfolded you, and took you to 3 different states and took you to Walmart in each state, you couldn't tell me where you were based off of the items that were in the store. But if I took you to 3 stores within Houston, you'd be able to tell the ethnicity, the income, and the education level of the people who shop that store. That's one of the things that make us different. Well, Hugh, he's not Jewish, and he asked us if he could go to Brooklyn and study kosher there. So we set him up with this guy, and he went up, and he spent a week, stayed in a kosher hotel, he ate kosher, he visited supermarkets, he went to Jewish schools, he ate at kosher restaurants, and when he came back, he told us that our plans weren't bold enough. I mean, I had planned on having a kosher bakery, and he said, no, keeping kosher is a lot like having celiacs. You crave variety, but it isn't always there for you. So thanks to Hugh, we added kosher sushi and kosher tortillas, and we hired 3 mashgiachs, which are religious figures in the synagogue who are authorized to cut meat. And while all Jews don't keep kosher, some never do, some only do at the high holy days, the community appreciated the fact that we assorted our stores to those who did. And 6 months after we opened, our closest competitor closed down and went out of business. Now there are a handful of items for which HEB is really known for. Our tortillas have been written up in Texas Monthly and in a food magazine called Epicurean. A lot of people who don't live in Texas anymore, they'll come visit us with an extra suitcase and fill them up with tortillas and take them home. And so our butter tortillas are pretty famous. Avocados were our number one shrink item, meaning we threw more avocados away because they were damaged, would have a bruise on them than any other item in the store. And so we had a department manager, a produce manager in one of our stores, and he decided to cut the brown spots out of the avocados and make guacamole out of them. And here's what we realized. White people like to eat guacamole. White people don't know how to make guacamole. And this one department manager created a business that today is over $50 million at HEB. A few years ago, companies started up like HelloFresh or Blue Apron. They come up with these meal kits that they would send directly to your house, and you come home from work and you open it up and then you mix it all up. And like this scared us. Like we read some articles that said people aren't going to go to the grocery store anymore, that food's just going to be delivered to their house. And so I paid 100 customers to take a picture of every meal they ate for a week. So that was 2,100 pictures we got back, and we had a meeting room not quite as big as this, and we laid all the pictures down on the ground and tried to look for similarities. Like there were pictures of bananas or pictures of a Big Mac, but I was really interested, like how many meals were protein, a starch, and a vegetable? What did those look like? And my biggest takeaway from that exercise was this: holy shit, a lot of people eat off paper plates. And so I asked my staff, which was 25 people, all made over $100,000 a year, how many of you eat off paper plates? And 70% of them raised their hands, including my number 2 guy. And I'm like, this blew my mind, because I don't eat off paper plates. Like, why do you do that? They're like, we don't want to do the dishes. Well, it was right then we knew that meal kits weren't going to work, because if you get a meal kit, you have to prep it in a bowl and then put it in something and you got to do dishes. So we jumped over that, just like in China, they never put in landlines, they just went directly to cell phones. We jumped over that, and we developed these prepared meals. Anybody ever buy these? Yeah, great. And this one I'm especially proud of, because we know as Texans, we love queso and we love brisket. What a match. You put it in the oven or the barbecue for 10 minutes, and then we make you stir it. And once you stir it, you say, oh, I made that. $400 million business. And then over on the right, we don't put the HEB name on any product unless it's better than the national brand or different. And I worked on a team of 7 people who ate ice cream for 4 hours every Wednesday for 3 years until we could have a product that was better than Bluebell. And I'd come home and my wife would say, here's what I made for dinner, like chocolate ice cream. I just ate chocolate ice cream and I got paid to do it. Can you believe it? And the third word is community focused. And as I showed you in the earlier photo of the kid walking through the parking lot, we're going to be the last to close and the first to open. One of the things we did is we converted a tractor trailer into a mobile kitchen that can feed those who are displaced or first responders. We can feed 2,000 people in 1 hour with 5 people. In 2005, when Hurricane Ike slammed into East Texas, it was on the heels of Hurricane Katrina over in New Orleans, which wasn't FEMA's finest moment. And they were nervous about a repeat performance, so they said, everyone in the Golden Triangle. Anybody here from out Beaumont Way? Like, Golden Triangle is such an interesting name for that area because it's not the most golden place I've ever been. But those are some stubborn Cajuns who live over there. Like, we aren't leaving, we're gonna hunker down. And they did. And the storm came, and people didn't leave. And the day after the storm, it was 90 degrees plus, and my 9 stores had no electricity, and the food inside of it started to rot. And I rented a helicopter and went over to go meet with FEMA, but they wouldn't meet with me so that I could hook up generators and clean out my stores and start over. And that was a problem because people in Beaumont needed food, and they needed cleaning supplies. So I did this. I typed up this note, and it read, these buses are authorized by me, Scott McClelland, to enter the Golden Triangle area in order to empty perishable products from stores that have lost electricity so we can restock and begin to serve groceries to the citizens of East Texas. Thank you for your support and your understanding. And I rented 3 buses and filled them with partners. And our top security guy drove a Cadillac Escalade. And somebody found a flashing blue light like they used to have in a Kmart. And we stuck it on top of the Cadillac, and they drove over. And when they got to Jefferson County, the police stopped them and said, halt, you can't come in here. And the driver said, no, I'm authorized. He said, what do you mean you're authorized? He said, I have a letter. And he handed in this letter. He showed it to the cop. And the cop escorted 3 buses to our first store. And we reopened our stores a week before Walmart. But did you notice that every point that I made about culture and values was supported by a story? Because culture gets passed down generation by generation, and it's reinforced by storytelling. We have a course at HEB that's called The Spirit of HEB, and we take our new employees, our new partners through it, and explains our cultural beliefs via stories that are told by individuals and incidents that have occurred over the course of the year. Like back when there was the Tylenol scare with the poisoning, somebody tried to poison one of our stores, put a tainted product in one of our stores in Waco. So we just closed the store and threw everything away and started back up again. It explains how culture lives. And we always have somebody or a couple people with a lot of tenure that come in and they tell their own stories. This becomes a strong demonstration early on about how important the culture is and cites specific examples of how it lives. And then there's something to be said for repetition. That's why great leaders see themselves as the chief reminding officer. Jack Welch used to say that his job was to say the same thing over and over and over again until eventually people got it. And the way for people to embrace a message is to hear it over a period of time, and preferably from a variety of different people within the organization. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk for just a second about cultural drift, because it points to the need we have to work on culture, and it needs to be more than an event or a workshop. Like a garden, it has to be tended. And Starbucks and Southwest Airlines are 2 companies that I typically would have used in the past about examples of companies with strong corporate cultures, but in recent years they've drifted. Starbucks had successfully positioned themselves as the 3rd place. In fact, somebody came up to me today and said, hey, I met you in a Starbucks. That's because before I would go home at work at night, I would just go work at a Starbucks, because if I went home too early, my wife would tell me what to do. But rapid expansion put a strain on this, and their quest for scale made intimacy more difficult. Training couldn't keep pace with expansion. The coronavirus obviously didn't help them much, and this led to a big focus on efficiency. And this wounded the customer and employee experience, which led to tension and unionization efforts, and now they're going back and trying to recapture that. For Southwest, thousands of flights were canceled 2 or 3 winters ago during an operational meltdown because they hadn't spent enough money on developing the technology for scheduling. Financial results lagged, customer service deteriorated, employee morale issues grew, and the famous culture of fun diminished. Now, they're going to start charging for bags, and they're going to start assigning seats. Culture that works at smaller companies becomes difficult to maintain at massive ones. And especially when 2 companies join together, each one brings two different cultures together. Both companies, companies struggle to maintain distinctive cultures, and both Starbucks and Southwest struggled to maintain their distinctive cultures after their charismatic leaders stepped down and someone else came along. When the going gets tough, rather than focusing as much on culture, they made major operational changes without fully thinking through the repercussions. So, what is it that you can do? Well, first, start with identifying your who. Who is it that you serve? Who are you in business for? Instead of your why. This will give your employees purpose and allow them to see the value of their work. And then use simple and direct language. At one point, we hired, over the course of 5 years, we hired 25 MBAs from Harvard to go to work at HEB. Only 2 of them made it. And the reason why is while they were good in the boardroom, when they went into the back room, they couldn't lower the way that they spoke to people in a way that got them to root for, the employees to root for them. And if your corp org chart is like this, the majority of the people are at the bottom, and you have to be able to relate to them. Then be willing to make decisions, bold decisions that serve as markers in your commitment to your who. And finally, if you haven't thought about it, then think about what are the 3 adjectives that best describe what your business is all about. Then start to tell the stories and ask others to contribute their own. Become the chief storyteller at your company. And if you don't think you're very good at it, you can hire someone to be a storytelling coach and actually get trained on it. I did it for a guy who worked for me that my boss told me was charismaless. We gave him a storytelling coach, and while he didn't turn into JFK, he certainly became much more competent. And then hold roundtables or just brown bag lunches when you ask people to come in and shoot the shit. And you're like, what do you guys want to talk about? And ultimately, you'll end up telling stories about your career, or they'll tell stories about their career, and people will feel part of the movement. And then develop an awards or recognition that just not for your top performers from a financial standpoint, but at HEB, maybe the most coveted award is to earn the Spirit of HEB. And that's to be known for the person who best exemplifies what the culture is all about. The best compliment somebody can give me about HEB is when they say, you know, one of the reasons I like going to HEB is because your people are just nicer. That's a reflection of the culture. That's not a reflection of the strategy. Although part of our strategy is to have a strong culture. So I'll leave you with this, is take control of your strategy before it takes control of you. Thank you. You want me to take questions? Questions? Okay. All right. I've got like 5 minutes before they'll give me the hook. If anybody has a question about anything, I always feel like the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anyone have can ask me a question about anything, or if not, yeah.
Where was that pizza from?
Oh, so funny. So now that I'm retired, I spend half the year here, and then at noon I'm going to go out to California, which is where I'm from, and I have a daughter and grandkids. And there's a place out there that's called Bettina, and they have a sourdough crust, and they hand pull their mozzarella cheese, and they have a wood-fired, and they're a little bit snobby about their business. It's like you have to make a reservation to order a pizza to go. You can't just call no, you got to go online, and it is unbelievable pizza. So yeah. Yeah.
HEB sells a lot of gift cards.
Yes.
One of the stores or if you want to sell is Amazon. Can you tell us?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell a story. I'll tell a story to make a point. I've gotten to know a number of chefs and restaurant owners in town. And I was telling you earlier, one of my favorite restaurants in town is Kiran. If you haven't been to Kiran, I think it's the best Indian food around. And when she moved to a new location and opened it, we went the night that they opened, and a guy by the name of Shepard Ross, who owned another restaurant, was working at the front desk. And I'm like, what are you doing? You work here? He goes, no, I run the restaurant down the street. I said, I'm just here to help out Kieran. I have to tell you, I would not cross the street to help the president of Kroger if he'd been hit by a car. Like, this kind of blew my mind. Like, I have never owned a Costco card because you just shop at HEB. That's what you do. And so we don't sell Amazon cards because for 25 years, I would wake up and I would say this prayer. Dear God, Walmart is so big. They're the 600-pound gorilla. Don't let them squish me like a bug. Amen. And then over time, we figured out how not just to survive Walmart, but to thrive. And then along comes Amazon, who's way bigger than Walmart. And like, holy shit. And here's a little inside baseball. If you order groceries online at HEB and go pick them up, I lose money on every order. Because when you go into the store, you're free labor for me. But when you order online, I now pick the order for you, and I don't charge you anything for it. And if my average hourly rate is 18 bucks and it takes an hour to pick that order, I can't recapture the $18. So I'm not going to help Amazon. So, you know, they're evil. They're the new evil. So that's why we don't. Sorry. I had to tell a story to tell a story. Okay, last one. Yes, sir.
Yeah, being from Houston, you know, we see you advertise on certain, sports teams. How did you get into that?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So if you've lived in Houston for a long time, HEB started with these small stores called Pantry, and they were solely focused on price, like Spirit Airlines. We had the lowest price at the time. And then Walmart came, and we didn't have a low price anymore. And because the store was small, we didn't have the ability to get to low price. So we had to reposition our stores, and we built big stores, and like we had in the rest of the company, and open them and like, ta-da, look at this, it's a big, nice store. And people go, oh, HEB, you're the guys that run those little shitty stores with low prices. Like, no, this is a nice store. And so Randall's was really the gold standard in the 90s. The Onsteads did a marvelous job. They were the local grocer, but then they sold to Safeway. And one of the first things Safeway did was that they kicked out Boar's Head. And people went from being disappointed to just being pissed off. And so Kroger was undergoing a leveraged buyout from KKR. They weren't in the best of shape. They're from Cincinnati. Did you know in Cincinnati that they put chocolate in their chili and they eat it on noodles? Like if you gave me a goat and an onion, I could make better chili, but I don't live in Cincinnati, right? So we thought, okay, we're gonna position ourselves as a local grocer. And the year I got here, we lost $45 million. And we were within 6 months of pulling out of Houston. And one day Charles Butt called me and he said, do you realize you are losing $1 million a week? And I came to realize he and I have a lot in common. We both have lint at the bottom of our pocket. Like, I better do something different in a hurry. So we tried to carve out to be the local grocer. And so we decided, oh, we'll hire a sports star because everybody knows who they are. But rather than just doing a typical testimonial, go back to the old Mr. Whipple ads with Procter & Gamble and Charmin Tissue, well, we'll put me on and have me become the face of HEB, and I'll play the stupid grocery guy, which was not a big creative stretch for me at all. And I just kind of played the everyday guy. And the real, people say, weren't those commercials fun? Like, yeah, they were fun. Meeting the sports star was terrific. The real fun was because people felt that they knew me, because I was in their living rooms at night, people would come up to me all over and just start talking to me. And I got a lot of stories, and I got a lot of good ideas. And my target market was 60-plus-year-old woman, around 200 pounds, obviously a good shopper because they bought a lot. Like, the hotties never wanted to have their picture taken with me, not even once, ever. But people would come up and they talk. I was in India on vacation, and somebody comes up to me and go, oh, you're the HEB guy. And so, I mean, it worked. And so we positioned ourselves as the local grocery chain. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right. When you checked in, you received 2 items. One is Scott's favorite book. So I am a learner pusher for those that know me, but now you've got one more thing to read and learn from. So appreciate again as part of the
And I'm a
today.
grocery guy, so it's not hard to read. Like, you don't have to have gone to Harvard to understand it. And I think you'll enjoy the book. It's really good.
And then the second thing is there should have been a thank you card when you walked in. One of the things that we really like to do for our speakers is share what we took away as appreciation and gratitude. So if you don't mind taking a minute, either a quote from today, a favorite HEB story that you had, an aha moment, just to give back as a thank you to Scott for joining us today. We appreciate everyone's time. We will see hopefully everyone again in the fall, and I hope you enjoy this beautiful Houston weather while we have it. Thanks for coming today.